I don't use the word magic ever, but it was magical that it was such a meaningful experience. Like, I know that because of that face-to-face experience all the way back then with this small group of people, I know that led to seminary.
Welcome to Created Creative. I'm Dawn.
And I'm Ruth.
Happy Lent.
Happy Lent.
You know, many religions have a greeting for their hard holiday, and we do not have something for Lent. People say easy fast or good Sabbath, but we don't have something for Lent.
It's actually just thinking about that too, because you can't really say Happy Lent because
it's not.
Yes, Lenten greetings.
Lenten greetings.
Did you go to Ash Wednesday service?
I had to set up the live stream. Setting up the live stream is the most stressful part.
On Ash Wednesday, for our live stream, our entire audiovisual system had everything go wrong that day. It was funny. We have a really good sound system and really good live stream, but that day my microphone wasn't working.
No.
They had to give me a handheld, and then it was funny. So Ash Wednesday was my first act. Yeah, where most of the people at my church had seen me after I had been sick for a few weeks. I had given the audiovisual people this short video to share right at the beginning of my sermon. And so I introduced it, and then I sat down at the little chair, which nobody can see me when I'm sitting back in this little chair area. I can see the screen, and I could see that she tried to start the video. It played 10 seconds of it, and then it stopped. And so I'm like waiting because I'm like, obviously they're having trouble. They'll probably just start it again. In the meantime, there's this little gap where nothing's happening. And one of the guys in my church is starting to make his way up to make sure I hadn't fallen over. It was so cute. And then I pop up and I'm like, no, I'm totally fine. I was waiting for the video, and everybody laughed. It was very cute. He was coming to the rescue.
Nice.
Yeah. And then they couldn't get the video going. So then they just ended up showing it a little bit later, and I did my sermon first. Fortunately, it didn't need to be first. That was lucky because otherwise it could have been a pain.
It's also fun, different energy being in that building at night.
Right.
It's like Good Friday. Not very often.
Not too often.
We have like a German cathedral that people came to America and decided to recreate or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so the windows are a major factor.
Yeah.
Without sun, there's bad light here. Who knew?
A whole different feeling, right?
And everyone's been at work all day, and it's just a different mode, a different energy. Also, our post loop, he played the theme from Up.
That's nice.
The person who finally got there to do the live stream that I had set up. When it started, she's like, that's mean. Like, it's so emotional.
It's a sweet song. Do you have Lenten services every week now?
We don't, but this week we have a second Wednesday that is supposed to be more welcoming, called Imago Dei, but it's DEI. So
okay.
Build is the opposite of Christian nationalism. Like, they literally say that.
Okay, good.
This is the church where you can be safe.
That's good. We do have Lenten services every week now.
Okay.
The one on Ash Wednesday is usually almost a full hour, but the next week's will be shorter, like a half hour.
Plan as much.
Well, yeah, that'll be good.
Good.
Yeah.
What a good time to have Tara.
Yeah. She kind of embodies, I think, everything that this podcast is about in a lot of ways.
We're figuring out how we talk about this to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Something that keeps coming to mind is that in our space, creativity is not something you do. It is something you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's called Created Creative. It's not this extra hobby. It's not fluff. It is actually what you are. And I think that also comes up with the book that we're going to discuss next week. So everyone join us. It's Let Them by Mel Robbins.
And in some ways, with some of Tara's projects that she talks about, she was doing things like what we are doing with this podcast long ago. And so I'm excited for our listeners to hear more about some of the things she's done to cultivate and bring together the creative people in her communities.
Everyone read or listen to the book. And here's Tara.
Here's Tara. Oh, it's so nice to see you. How are you today?
I am good. I have to tell you that I just had contractors leave my house.
What'd you get?
We're working on so many projects, but we had a shelving, like a built-in, put into the dining room, and we put a bench over the heater, so that way there's a place to sit as you come in the door.
A heated place.
Nice.
Oh.
And they were staining, so it's a little bit aromatic in here.
Oh,
Are you going to alter your brain? Because you're
I don't know.
I
It's 1 degree, and I propped the screen mind door open so that I can be coherent in our
Okay.
conversation today.
If you start to not make any sense, we'll tell you to please leave the room and go get some fresh air.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy you could join us today. And would you take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. I'm Tara Lamont Eastman. I am a pastor, I'm a podcaster, and I like to say on my podcast, I'm a practitioner of holy shenanigans, which incorporates all sorts of creative practices, but also connects me to some really wonderful people like yourselves.
Yay. And Dawn and I had the joy of being on your podcast not long ago.
Yes.
That was really
Thank
fun.
you so much for visiting.
Yeah.
We're like when people used to watch must-see TV and they'd have a night where the characters are interacting with the others from that night.
It's like a crossover from one
Crossover episode. There
Yes.
we go.
Mhm.
I knew there was a word and it was, I'm not even sitting with paint fumes and I can't come up with my nouns.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how long have you lived where you live?
In the house that we are working on, we've been in this house for 26 years.
Oh, wow.
And she's just a young lady at 180 some years old.
Oh, wow.
But now you have a heated bench in her. So
Yes, we do. Yeah. So we've been working on renovation for over a year since I came back to the area from my previous call.
I'd love to see pictures of your house sometime. Mine was built in 1890, and that's really old for this area, but
Yes.
where you are, it's a whole nother level.
and mine, I'm the first inhabitant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Tara, we have many things to talk with you about today.
Sure.
And I'd like to start by asking you what's been one of your most enjoyable creative experiences?
Well, I have to say that one that has helped me connect with both of you and so many other people. In 2020, I started podcasting just from the ground up in the middle of the pandemic. And that in and of itself was another opportunity to creatively work on my writing, because I would write my scripts ahead of time back when I started it, but also then learn how to invite other people into that space. And it's developed from there since 2020 and helped me connect with so many other creative people. It's an expression of my own creativity, but it also is a space where other people get to share their gifts as well.
Yeah, and I love your podcast, and it seems like you've done a lot of different things with it as well. You share a lot of your own creative things you make, but then also you interview people. And I remember getting some great sermon ideas from you along the way, too.
It's lectionary based.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of my first pass over the text originally. I'd incorporate some poetry or a blessing that would be in the form of a poem, sometimes my own, sometimes other poets. But that led to the second year of the podcast. I focused on 3.5 questions about love, what people love about themselves, what they love to do, and try to find a way to, again, connect people and maybe some folks that you might not find in the same room all the time or the same perspective. But around that topic, it was a very engaged conversation all about those 3.5 questions. I had a 9-year-old and then I had octogenarians.
That is so brilliant. I love that idea.
Yeah. Thank you. And then the third year, it really developed to lots of opportunities to share some of the work that other folks were doing, authors, illustrators, and so on.
Okay.
And now it's a mishmash.
Mishmash.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you come up with the name? It's a cool name that your podcast has.
I've kind of always had this affinity towards Irish things. So I got a card one time that said something about being a shenanigator. And I just, as a woman pastor, going, shenanigans and holy, because we were talking about everyday things that were holy and sacred. It just all came together. Yeah.
And one more question just about that. You have a really cool logo. Did you make that yourself?
The very first one, we had somebody on Fiverr did this one. They took and digitized a picture of me going like this. Then I drew the one that a lot of people know with the spiky hair. And currently we just wanted to go in a whole different direction and do something that was more organic. So it has these fun little flowers,
Okay.
So there's 3 ideations of that logo. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know you're so artistic, so I was like, I bet she's making these things herself. Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your creative process. When do you like to create? Do you need it quiet? Do you listen to music when you create?
When I am writing, especially, I need quiet. If there are people in the room, I am going to talk to the people or, in close vicinity. I am that kid in elementary school that the teachers would say, oh, such a great student if she could just stop talking to her neighbors.
Yeah.
So I need some quiet. I need some space. I do like to integrate some activity, like go for a walk so that I can clear my head, especially if I'm stuck on an idea and I'm not quite sure what to do with it. I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go let this percolate in my mind for a little bit while I go for a walk or go do something away from it to let my brain get a break.
Yeah.
So the physicality seems to be a part of your brain functioning.
Yeah. It helps a lot of that busyness in my brain to quiet down. And creative practices in and of themselves for me help me to focus in that way. As a child, I learned how to draw on the back of those little envelopes in pews of churches.
Like they were supposed to be for offering?
Yes, the offering envelopes. And so my dad would hand me those little envelopes and hand me the little pencil that look at the pew.
Yeah, the golf pencil.
Yeah.
And I would draw all over that little envelope. And some folks would say, oh, she should be listening. But I actually really was. It actually helped me to slow down and center myself so that as I was doodling and drawing, I really heard what was being said and sung at a much deeper level.
I want to hear a little bit about, not long ago, you shared with us like a TV news program, but it was featuring a program you had started some years ago that really was celebrating creativity.
It was.
So tell us about that.
So at that time, I was working as a layperson in a Presbyterian church, as their outreach person, and also as their worship leader for their contemporary service. And that space at church at that time was really living into the fresh expressions and new church developments of the early 2000s. And so that church actually sold their brick and mortar building. They rented a lodge on Lake Chautauqua from a local nonprofit. And we used that space for Sunday worship and our activities. The first service would be early and it would be on one side of the building. And then for the formal service, they would flip the room.
It's totally different.
Yeah, it'd be a totally different service. Originally, I was invited to become part of the staff to be their worship musician for the contemporary service. And I had come from a whole life of youth ministry and had gotten away from creative expressions. Previous to being in that system, I was in a system that was not as open to creative practices as part of a spiritual life. So when I came into that new church development, it's like all of the obstacles I had been facing creatively and the opposition that I was facing previously melted away. And so I got back to writing my own music. And then I started reaching out to other creatives in the community because I myself had experienced that kind of grief and loss around creative practices. And I knew that to be a spiritual process for me. And so I would have conversations with visual artists and musicians from a very broad spectrum. We had some young folks who did rap, some folks who did ambient noise, experimental music, visual artists that were working in fine art, and we had people making quilts and displaying their quilts. So that video that you saw about Artist Share, that was kind of like our big event after practicing these micro classes or get-togethers throughout the year. But it was this big celebration based on show and tell as a kid. You come and you share your gifts. Everybody's gifts are going to be appreciated. We all are going to listen politely. And, all those rules, because I really had this feeling like I knew what it was like to not feel nurtured in my own creative expression. And I really felt called at that particular point to reach out to those folks in the community.
And how long did that exist, the Artist Share?
About 4 years.
Oh, wow.
It lasted about 4 years. It would have kept going, except unfortunately that church lost its funding. So I had to reinvent my vocational life.
Was that when you went to seminary then?
I actually went to a Lutheran church to work as a youth director after that. And about a year into working at that church, I started having conversations about seminary because I had planned to go to seminary before at that previous church, but without a church and a pastor and the support.
Yeah.
Denominationally, they like you to have a support system for,
Right.
discernment in that process, which is good. But I landed at a Lutheran ELCA church, and about a year of working there, I started asking people those questions. How do I pursue this? And I ended up working at that church for over 8 years as a youth director, but my role shifted in that time because I did a study in youth and theology through Princeton Theological Seminary. It was called the IYM, Institute for Youth Ministry. And back then it was a 3-year certificate program. And after that, I ended up going to Wartburg Theological Seminary in their theological education for emerging ministries, which is a different track to ordination and word and sacrament.
How did you choose Iowa?
They were graciously giving me a grant.
Great money talks.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
They wanted you enough that they found the money. That's how I'm hearing it.
Exactly. This calling that I had felt since I was like 17 years old, finally.
That is amazing. Wow. And I'm just curious. So then did you have to go there? Could you do it at a distance?
It was a pilot. It was like the first, if not the first, maybe the second of that particular study program. And so some of it was online. I remember when I was doing homiletics class, a preaching class, that we did it through Skype back in the day.
Okay.
And then we would upload our sermons to Vimeo so our classmates could see our sermons.
Sure. Yeah.
And then we would get together on Skype and do a discussion. And then also there were intensives on site.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Very cool that you were able to get a grant and go down that road that you'd been called toward for a long time.
It's definitely been a journey.
Yeah, I love it. All right. First of all, I want to say that the Artist Share thing sounds like it was just such a cool community. I'm sure it was probably a lot of grief too when it ended. Yeah.
Yeah. I am really thankful that regionally I'm pretty close to a lot of those folks that were a part of Artist Share.
Yeah.
And I have some very good friends still that were a part of that.
Oh, good.
Not everybody, because folks move and whatnot, but there was definitely a strong sense of community that was built out of that. I like to say a holy experiment. So Artist Share. Yeah.
A holy experiment.
So holy experiment, holy shenanigans.
Yep.
You sense a theme.
Yeah.
Yes. So who are some of your favorite creators?
Oh my goodness. In the theological world, I have this deep love of Fred Rogers.
Yay.
A fellow Presbyterian.
A fellow Presbyterian musician. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood made all of the little puppets, you know, Daniel Tiger and all that.
I'm deep into Daniel Tiger right now.
But I just loved his whole approach of creativity, but also his respect for children. It was such a beautiful ministry that Fred Rogers had, and it still continues with his organization, Fred Rogers Productions. Yeah. So Fred Rogers, and I didn't know for a long time that he was a minister, of seeing his show when I was a young person, but he has walked with me throughout my life. And there are some authors that have been very formative to me. Madeleine L'Engle, both her fiction and her poetry and her nonfiction. Her book, A Circle of Quiet, which is a part of the Crosswicks 3-book series. That book, Circle of Quiet, was very instrumental in encouraging me to start going to college. And this is years before I went and pursued a seminary program. I got married pretty young and had my daughter very young. And then all of my friends had gone off to college and had these different lives than I did. And so I was thinking at the age of 24, I was ancient and I could not go back to school.
That ship sailed.
Yeah.
I read about her journey with writing, especially all of the rejection she faced in A Wrinkle in Time, people not knowing where to place it, because was it fiction? Was it children's? Was it adults? Was it fantasy?
Which shelf of the bookstore do you look at?
Exactly. So in hearing her encouragement to just try it, keep going. So that book, A Circle of Quiet, really inspired me to start going to college as
awesome.
And then there's folks I can talk about, Anne Lamont. Then I can also think about another author. I don't know if you would know her work, but her name is Phyllis Tickle.
Oh, yeah.
I worked at an organization and she was on the board.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I know. So I don't know her, but she was a part of the flow of my life. Yeah.
I got connected with Phyllis through the emerging church movement. At that little Presbyterian church that I told you about with Artist Share, I started bringing in authors to do these book salons, or if they were, doing a tour to promote their book, I'd say, hey, if you're going to be in Rochester or Buffalo, can you take a stop here? We'll feed you, we'll put you up.
Yep.
And Phyllis was incredibly gracious. It was when she was promoting her book, The Great Emergence. She came to our area. I got to pick her up at the Buffalo airport and have alone time in the car with Phyllis Tickle.
That's really cool. I love that.
So few people, when they bring up their favorite creators, have met them.
I know she was
Amazing.
such a kind and caring person. And as I may have alluded to, like in my journey to become a pastor, it was a very long and winding road. And there were lots of stops and starts and, oh man, I've got to start again in this different tradition.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to find a grant if I'm going to do this. But Phyllis would write to me and she would say, keep going, the church will catch up. Keep going. The church will catch up.
I love that. Yay.
Yeah.
That is so good.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I went to the Wild Goose Festival for the first time. And I was sitting in a tent talking with a friend I hadn't seen in years that she knew Phyllis and I knew Phyllis. And over our shoulders was a tent of memorials of the people who'd been essential in founding Wild Goose Festival. And over our shoulders was a portrait of Phyllis.
Of course, it's her.
Wow.
Tell us about the Wild Goose Festival.
Yeah. So
Do we want to go?
yes, you want to go. If people are thinking about creativity, if they're approaching their faith or spirituality from a different perspective, this is a place where you can receive care and compassion and encouragement. So I would recommend it. I've got to do my submission too. So you all should do it and I'll do it. We'll plan together.
But people could just come.
Oh, yes.
You could just sign up and pay money and go.
Correct. You can just attend the event. You don't have to present. But they have a very open way of applying to be a presenter. There's been folks that come that have the whole book deal and you can purchase their book and sign in the tent. And there can be people that don't have that. They could just be coming and wanting to share a story or a gift that they have with the community. Yeah.
Wow.
What makes a good fit for that subculture? And you're like, these are the kinds of workshops, presenters, tents, whatever.
Oh, wow. It's such a broad expression. I think that the consistent ethics would be compassion, creativity, and a little bit of pizzazz.
Pizzazz is my high school show choir. Fargo South Pizzazz.
Pizzazz, yeah. But compassion on the front end.
Okay.
Compassion, creativity,
Interesting.
pizzazz.
Yeah.
We might fit in.
I think so. Dawn brings the pizzazz for sure.
Well, I am an actual member of Pizzazz, my
There
high
you
school show
go.
choir. So
Oh, so there. We're all set. Yeah.
I can share a clip
Yes.
if anyone needs.
Yes. And this year, it's actually much later in the season. It's Labor Day weekend.
Oh, it's later. Okay. That's
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah. Because the last 2 years I've attended, it has been so hot. It was right in the middle of July.
It's in North Carolina, is that right?
Union Grove, North Carolina. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Up in the mountains.
Dawn, we're going to have to do some.
We'll talk.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for your insights.
So let's see. What are you working on lately?
So I'm continuing to work on a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
Holy Shenanigans. I've been going through my list. Thankfully, I've got a wonderful list of folks that have reached out to me that want to come on and talk about their book or their different
Awesome.
activities. So that's become self-generating,
Nice.
which is lovely. Sometimes I wish I had more time to work on it, but as a
Yeah.
full-time pastor, you do what you can.
Yep, you do what you can. I know someone who had been on your show then talked to us a few weeks later, like maybe that
Marla?
Marla Tabiano.
Was it Marla?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, that
And
was
her
cool.
poetries. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're a feeder system. Thank you for us.
Yes.
Oh,
thank
you're
you for
welcome.
being-
you.
exactly.
Well, Marla
Yes.
is one of those folks who wants to return to talk about her new books that she's produced recently and released.
We really enjoyed talking to her. Yeah,
Yes.
she's great. And how much of creativity do you think is inspiration and how much is discipline?
There's times in my life that I think it's kind of 50-50. There are times that inspiration strikes and the song just comes together in this very amazing way. Or I've gotten an idea for a painting and I can see it in my head. And if I can get to my supplies and capture it, it can happen quickly. But if there's a longer term project, something that requires more devotion of time and energy, and it's a bigger project, I've got to establish a time.
Yeah.
I've got to make those windows. As I try to figure out how to balance life a little bit more, I'm in a new call and I have a little bit more space to navigate those things. Setting a block of time, usually Monday mornings is when I'm working on my sermon for my church world. Friday morning, I also part of a writing group online that gets together called The Writing Table. And I work on this personal project on Friday mornings. Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So discipline for you is most required in the realm of time, setting aside time.
Setting aside time. Yes.
Love it.
I feel like it's like setting the table for me. That if I set the table or if I want to have good lunches all week, I'll do the food prep, right?
Yep.
But there are times that inspiration will strike. I feel the Holy Spirit is like, hey, over here, pay attention to this.
I remember you used to post amazing pictures about things you were cooking. Do you still do that?
I do. About 15 years ago, I realized I needed to switch to a gluten-free diet and have been doing that since then. And so my hashtag was Tara Cooks GF. So
GF.
good food or gluten-free. Yeah.
Ah, yes.
Multi-useful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was how to set up those different aspects of creativity in an online presence was really helpful for me. I started a page that was just my cooking page, right? I have the Holy Shenanigans page, and then I have my personal one. And divvying that out, initially I was like, oh, but it's not consistent of a algorithm. But if people are looking for cooking, they can find the cooking.
Yep.
And if people are looking for the podcast, they can find the podcast.
Yeah. Is it a challenge for you keeping up with all the different ones?
It can be. And actually, I know later Dawn may offer some coaching advice.
You know where this is going.
Yes.
Have you heard this podcast?
I have. I listen all the time. I'm a faithful
Yay.
listener because I find what you share so helpful for me as a creative person. So thank you for that. And I think right now, especially as I know a lot of folks are trying to figure out beyond one particular platform, how to get their word out there, not lose the audience that they've gathered, but also feel good about the platform that you're using.
Right. Yeah. So how do you see creativity and spirituality connect?
I just believe that they are interwoven, interconnected. As I told you the story about being a little child sitting in church and drawing on the back of offering envelopes, that drawing space allowed me that internal quiet to listen and to hear the text read and take part in the music. And for me, sometimes I think it's a challenge because I love so many different expressions of creativity and art. You know, I love writing music. I love to write just spiritual that hopefully people could engage with and wrestle with some of their own spiritual questions. I love visual art. I love poetry. So I guess for me, sometimes it's hard to be like, do I have to pick one? And and at this point in my life, I do not have to pick one.
Nope. No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Not at all. So is there something that Dawn could give you some coaching on today?
Yes, my question. So I have a website that's TaraLamontEastman.com and it needs some TLC. I know that very much. But I'm trying to figure out, because currently I am on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I even share some of my stuff on Indeed and LinkedIn. But that's a lot of maintenance.
It is.
Across those platforms. Initially, I got involved with TikTok during the pandemic because so many people went over to TikTok. That's kind of had this big boom of popularity. But I loved that the format of TikTok allowed you to do a little bit more editing with their videos and things like that. It was before Reels were a thing on Instagram. So you could create something on one platform, download it, and drop it into another. But I found recently that there's a lot of legal challenges to that. Sometimes you can drop a song into something on one platform that you go to share to another, and they totally scrub all your audio because it doesn't have the same legal permissions. So you have to learn how to navigate that. Like most of the time, I don't use the background music over on TikTok anymore because then I can like download it and repurpose it.
Yep. And you still have your audio.
So I guess I'm just looking for some advice on how do you choose which way to go with your social media.
What is your goal? Why are you on social media?
To connect with people, to get a message of hope out there in the world, to also help people connect with the podcast.
Who are those people who connects most strongly? Like an ideal client profile, you know?
Yeah, I feel like there initially were a lot of women clergy, but now having expanded to a little bit more of an interview format, I have authors and teachers.
So they're people who've been to college. They're more often female identifying.
Yep.
They're probably in the United States.
Some global. Yeah, some global.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else could we say about all of them? Do they shop at Target or Walmart?
Probably Target.
People know.
Yeah. Probably Target people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are they over or under 35?
Maybe over 35. There are some
We're not
younger
sure.
ones, but probably over 35 majority.
Okay, so the bullseye. Over
Yeah.
35, United States, somehow spiritually connected, college educated Target shopper.
Yeah.
Somebody knows where they are.
Okay.
Like, put that
demographically
into-
speaking.
Yeah, demographically speaking, they are more somewhere than somewhere else. So go where they are and put most of your energy there in that format. They might be honestly on Pinterest.
True.
As I
Thought
just
of
said it out
Pinterest.
loud, I'm like, that person is on Pinterest.
Wow, they
Yeah.
are. Yeah, that person is on Pinterest. Yeah.
So then you would
I'm
like
on
make the
Pinterest.
thing. Well, great. We're halfway there. So you make it for Pinterest and repurpose elsewhere, like make a perfect match
Yeah.
for Pinterest.
Okay.
The other
Yeah.
thing, part B, that you didn't ask for,
Okay. I'm here for it.
don't depend on social media. More
I
and more
know.
people are disillusioned, and they'll invent a new one, but I think it'll get more and more dissipated. We used to have ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS, right? And now
Right.
we've got 110,000 things to watch. Every week, 30 million people would watch Friends.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an outlier. I just happened to know about that show.
Yeah.
So there's no way the most popular Game of Thrones finale came nowhere close. We have to be ready for a huge disintegration of where people are as they move around between social media.
Yes.
So you need to own the list. You've got to get your own emails and
Okay.
own your list. So that if MailChimp goes down, you own the list, you download it, you switch, but it's no effect on them.
Correct. Yeah.
But if Facebook goes down and you've lost 5,000 people, you don't have a good way of getting back to them.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
they also own Instagram.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot. But that can't be your main arena. It's secondary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is a switch in thinking for me because
It's
that
pretty big. I'm just thinking, what are we going to want in 2027? We're going to wish we had a big list.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I have probably spent the least amount of time in this kind of communication in my email list. I've been leaning so much more towards
Right.
the social media
sure.
and yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
podcast also is
yeah.
a way that people are getting to know you.
Oh,
It's
yes.
all a part of the thing.
Yes.
But you've got to be able to get to them without any of these intermediary companies where you do not own the content.
Correct.
I do
Okay.
the same thing. I've leaned a lot more into social media than my email list. So I'll be working on that with you too.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because I know for myself, I know that this is a concern, but I know that I am not the only one that's
Right.
wrestling with this right now.
And I think people, here's the prediction. We'll have this recorded. I'll either be so wrong and we'll play it later and it'll be funny.
Okay.
People want, as AI is bigger, they're going to want to see real people in front of them.
I
They're going to
believe
go to
that.
live things because you know for sure you see the words coming out of someone's mouth right in front of you.
Mhm.
They're going to get real books they can touch. They're going to go to live retreats, not online retreats. My people, this will have already happened, but my people in my 6-month group, I'm sending them a box via Ruth because she's good at it. Like they're going to get a real thing in the mail, even though we're connecting online. Yeah, like tangible connection. As we advertise our business, I think it will be live speaking engagements, Wild Goose Festival that you've already done.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
going to be that more and more
Yeah.
because people won't know what's real and they'll just say, forget it, I'm out. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll either be super, super wrong or this is going to happen.
I mean,
But be ready.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I remember early on in my spiritual quest to find a church that had a bigger tent.
Yes.
I attended a worship retreat at Mount St. Benedict's in Erie, Pennsylvania. And it is a monastery. The sisters there are incredible people. And one of the sisters, Sister Carolyn, she would host a quarterly retreat for women in transition, all people who identified as women. And we would go to this retreat center and they would feed us and they would share creative practices with us and they would love on us, whomever we were, from whatever background we were. And that was, I don't use the word magic ever, but it was magical that it was such a meaningful experience. Like I know that because of that face-to-face experience all the way back then with this small intimate group of people, I know that led to going and applying for that grant for seminary, right?
Right.
Without that, the other
Right.
would not have come.
Yep.
Right. Without that, I wouldn't have imagined of something like Artist Share,
Uh-huh.
right? Or Holy Shenanigans podcast.
And you had to be embodied in that
Yeah.
first step.
That's
so
helpful.
True.
Yeah.
So make it possible to see these
Uh-huh.
people. Make them
Yeah.
come to you, whatever.
Yeah. That's true.
You're
I
in
love that.
Chautauqua. It's beautiful.
I know. I'm in Chautauqua County, and then I just work just south of there in Warren County. The new church that I am at is a beautiful 200-year-old building.
Oh,
It's just
awesome.
gorgeous stained glass and right on the main street of this very quaint town.
Very cool.
I would go there for a weekend in the fall,
Yes.
Tuesday through Thursday
Yes,
weekends.
that's a great
My
idea.
weekends, I just pick a day. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that.
Seriously.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing because even as folks talk about the needs to be more engaged in making change in the
Yep.
world,
Yep.
that it's really important that grassroots connection is where we're investing a lot of our time and energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that makes sense on spiritual caretaking and creative efforts as well.
So what's your first step? What can you do in the next 2 weeks?
I was thinking about actually setting a date for something like a retreat like I experienced at that Women in Transition.
This is real. I just was
Yeah.
like, I would go to you. Here. And you're like, actually, it already is happening. Okay.
I was
so
thinking about that this morning. Yeah.
within 2 weeks, you'll have a date, meaning you've booked a retreat center or you've cleared your church calendar and found a bed and breakfast nearby or what
Yeah.
is happening.
I think it might start with a baby step of doing a day retreat,
Great.
Mm-hmm.
setting a date for a day retreat. Because I really I was just thinking about that experience with those quarterly retreats with Sister Carolyn. I'm like, is there a way to do a Saturday morning 4 times a year?
Totally.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
there is.
What is the point of the retreat?
To support people in times of spiritual transition and offer creative practices.
Yeah.
That can happen.
I love it.
Okay,
Yeah.
we
That
have a
isn't
plan.
dependent on
It's
parties.
not social media. That thing is putting a flyer at Target
It is.
or whoever lets you. Starbucks lets you.
Yeah,
It doesn't need social. It can be supported by social media, but that can also be grassroots.
nice.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm so happy that you could be with us today, Tara. This was
Thank
wonderful.
you. Yeah, and like I said earlier, for so long I kept thinking that I have to choose between things. Even in this invitation you've offered to me to think outside of the social media situation, like I don't just have to choose that. There are other options. And I think that's an important thing for other folks to hear too.
Right.
There are other options for them to connect and build community and spiritually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
Encouragement.
Thank you for joining us for Created Creative.
We're so glad that you could be with us today. We love that you listen. Please share our podcast with a friend. And as always, we would love it that if you're getting value out of this show, to rate and review.
The book that we're going to discuss next week, it's Let Them by Mel Robbins. So everyone join us.
And as always, go create something.